So one day I shared on Instagram that Bella was helping me with a chore, and somebody commented, "Why don't you let the child be a child?" And I was like, and I feel like that is the society in which we are growing up in the sense that children are like, let them be free, let them play. And I'm not
responsibility.
I'm not saying that, you do child labor, like the child is 3 years old and they're washing clothes and they whatever the case is. But I think a lot of the times we forget that we are training the kids to eventually do these things for themselves. That's why you have people going to college and they cannot wash their clothes, they cannot cook, they cannot do any things because they didn't do any of these things in the house. Whereas just a few years ago, children were actually an asset to the home because when they came, they joined in the family responsibilities and they helped their parents take care of the house. Because that's why I find a lot of young people complain about adulting. It's so hard to be an adult. It's like it's life. Like I feel like we don't grow the kids up doing those things and go and paying a bill and knowing what these things are, so it's not a surprise when they're an adult. Like, this is life, this is what you do. I feel like sometimes we just coddle the kids like a bit too much.
Look at all of us. We left our countries, went over to Cuba and left parents and all of the support and to go and study for how many years.
And there were people who were ill prepared.
Actually, get somebody actually had a very interesting take on that when he said when the women had their kids, that was around the time of after the World War, and things were tough. People were trying to get the economy back. So having kids, like you said, was an asset to the family. People work more than basically people worked mainly in factories. So you have 10 kids, you have 10 kids in the factory, and you have more income coming home. And then now people are having kids and they want to make their life easier for their kids. Okay, but I have a maid, but I have a helper. Because it was just, I realized that initially it was just a babysitter. Then it was somebody to help the house. So now it's a sitter. Some people even give their sitters cars, they give their sitters places in the house. So the sitter now does everything, takes the child to school, washes, cooks, cleans, does everything. So these kids literally grow up great.
Learning nothing.
The sitter sits down to help them with their homework, all the things that the parents should have been doing in the house. But it also teaches the child, like, you don't really have to do it yourself. There's always somebody to
do it.
So like you say, when they go to university and they're dropped in the real world, because right now there's this issue where Gen Z is now having difficulties adjusting in it.
And I think a part of that is because
Why people have to eat nowadays.
And I think a part of it is because they're being raised in a society or in a home where they don't have to take up those responsibilities themselves. I think it's absolutely important that a child be raised to do some of those things, to be part of the family, to do part of the chores, I've even heard of families that require, I mean, not here, because I don't think it's possible here, but in the States, that require their kids to get a job at 15 and pay rent. But not in the sense that, like there's a balance. I'm not saying either that you just send the child off and you don't give them any fun times or anything like that. But at the same time, we have to remember that we are raising kids to be adults. And I interestingly, when I was an intern, one of the advices that stuck with me is that you're not an intern just doing scrub work, like go do this, go do that. You are going to be a house officer one day. So act like it, and I feel like it's the same thing. You're raising a child, they're going to be an adult one day. So, yes, have that balance, but train them up, So I think that's a very good point.
I think one of the issues for all the parents is they try to introduce everything in bulk onto it.
Yeah.
So when they're 16, now everyone's watching it. But if you start from the time they're 4, 5, wash up it.
And it has to be age appropriate too, neither am I saying like take a 2-year-old and tell them go and wash their clothes, but a 2-year-old can do lots of things, like you change their pamper, they can take their pamper and put it to the bin, or they're done eating, they can take their plate and put it to the cup and put the plate in the sink. And the thing is, at that age, they're so willing to do those things, like they want to do them, and so you can hone in that, like that desire, and just teach them, hey, that this is just part of being a family. When you're part of the family, you help up as well. So
and apart from even those like skills, there's also the other soft skills and things that they're supposed to pick up on as well. In terms of as they getting older, in terms of how, for example, they manage their finances. So not even just the chores of the house.
Yeah.
Some people might argue, oh, we have technology now. Like when I was growing up, I had to go learn how to wash by hand. Now, you can have a washing machine, wash plates up, dishwasher. Yeah, so some people can argue that, but what about in terms of the other skills, in terms of interaction with your siblings and, doing those things?
Grocery shopping,
finances.
Budget.
So many people grow up and they start working, they earning money, and then suddenly managing and handling their own finances is an issue. Like as a family, you can, your child growing up, you introduce them into those things, the budget, the things that we're doing that. But then so many times the child is in a cocoon, they turn 16 or 17, they're in high school, they drive in $30,000 cars that mommy and daddy is paying for, and then at some point in their life, suddenly they realize they have to be responsible. There's insurance and there's all these things, and to them it's like, what? Because it's new, because nobody ever really told them that thing. They just got a key. And even in terms of servicing the vehicle, they don't do it because mommy and daddy takes care of all of that. So just those little things as well as not, you can say it's not necessarily things that you could be replaced by technology, but also helps in the home. But I think the also crux of the matter that we're noticing is that when there is a breakdown, in the home in terms of marriages and families, which we've seen there is a trend out of in terms of family cohesion, then some of those things suffer. Because if you don't have marriages that are lasting, where the children can learn from, and I learned a lot of things about babies from just helping out my mom with my younger brothers. Right, and that for me was like the greatest school that I got, just watching my dad soothe my younger brothers and all of those things, and you get a lot of things from that. But when you don't have families, or you have a society that's not family centric anymore, that becomes even harder and takes an extra effort that you have to put into to make sure that happens.
Because even that thing you said about the dishes, it makes a lot of sense, in terms of hard skills and soft skills. Only outside, the hard skill is washing dishes, but on the soft skills you have plate arrangement. Some people don't know how to stack plates. It teaches you how to arrange space
and the responsibility.
Water conservation, like there are all these different things. It's even like a mathematical chemistry thing. How much soap creates how many bubbles you need. Like, I'm one because there needs to be bubbles.
There's a lot to learn. Also, not to waste stuff, conservation.
So when people look at it like, oh, it's child labor, it's not really child labor because you're teaching. We just look at it on the outside, but there's so many different things.
And it's even good for the actual child at that age where they are, because when they're 2 and 3, they're also like learning, hey, this is a plate. If I throw it down, it's gonna break. I need to be careful, or just gross motor skills and fine motor skills. So it's good for them in the now, and then it's also good for them as they get older.
They're just too sensitive in this day and age.
You know what I think it is? I think that a lot of the time society does pendulum swings. So when we grew up, our parents were probably too heavily handed, so they hit us too much and they screamed at us too much or whatever. And so you find our generation now swinging to the other side where we don't want to discipline the kids, but that is not the answer. The pendulum swing is not the answer. So people grew up in a society where purity culture, don't do this, don't do that. And it was like, dating was difficult within the church context. So people swing to the other side and date whoever you want. No, you can't swing from one side or the other. Both extremes are bad. And you need to be able to find a balance. Well, what about you, Charmaine?
Well, you guys said most of what I was thinking. Yeah, and I agree completely. Because especially for chores, for me, the way chores was introduced in my family is that it's a form of punishment. So my relationship with chores was like a love-hate relationship. So you misbehaved, go and wash the dishes because you did that. So I grew up not liking to do certain stuff because of the way it was introduced to me, right? And then when I became a teenager, I became very neat. So I liked doing the chores, but then because my parents were always forcing me to do it, I didn't like to do it for them. So when they were not home, I would clean the entire house spick and span. But if they asked me to do it for myself, I was not going to do it. I would cry just because, you know, it was forced upon you and as a form of punishment. So we have to try to get kids to love to do the chores, you know. You do it because you want the house to be neat, or you realize that they have an inclination to washing dishes, or, you know, so okay, you can go ahead and wash the dishes, and not as a form of punishment and control to control them, right? So, and in terms of what you said, you know, in terms of them being appreciative of everything, I think the backside to that is where the grandparents, that pendulum swing. So when they had children, they could not afford certain things. So now they have grandchildren, they'll spoil them with everything. So that's my fear with baby.
That's like a video for a whole.
Yes, because it's always like a different parent. No, it's like a parent.
That's it. Yes.
It's like pendulum is stuck on both sides and the child isn't.
Yes. All right.
But you know what you said about the punishing for chores?
true.
That reminded me so much of books, because I am like a book fanatic. I love reading, and I think that one of the number one things you can do for a child is read. In the Caribbean, like, you make it noise and be like, "You too quiet, go and read a book," and it's like, a book is a punishment. So people don't grow up liking books and liking to read because it's just associated with like a punishment. Just reminded me of that. I feel like we need to be careful about those things as well.
So you're right. The earlier we introduce, you know, these different concepts and these different disciplines in them of being responsible, that chores are fun and they need to do chores, the easier it is for them to love to and to want to do it, you know, as they grow up. So the onus is on us, and you guys are doing a good job, you know, with the girls.
Guys, if you haven't yet seen videos about homeschooling, full-time working, and
having them by you cooking as well, you know, developing the love for cooking.
I remember one time that there was one of the poets was giving us a spoken word piece, and he spoke about the time where his mom taught him to wash dishes. She pulled a chair, she told him, "Let me teach you how to do it." And he said for the first time in his life, he was about maybe 4 or 5, he felt like he was a big man because he was being introduced into a world that only adults. And the way that she introduced it into me had such a lasting impression on him. And it makes a lot of sense the way you introduce your kids to certain things. So they will be introduced to washing dishes, whether or not they like it. Either by force they go to university, or we can actually aid them in love. And then when they grow older, you see the difference between who actually.
I agree.
So I'm gonna tell you guys how I learned to iron. So I was about 7 or 8, and it was a Sunday night, and my dad back then he would iron all of our school clothes on the Sunday night. So he was ironing, and I was in the living room making trouble, and I broke one of my mother's vases that was on the table, and my punishment was to stand by daddy and have daddy teach me to iron. And I stood there crying, "Oh, but daddy, I don't want to learn," you know. And that's how I learned to iron.
So you
and I
like
hate it. I do not like to iron. I don't like to iron.
It's amazing that you can even remember.
Yes.
I don't remember how I like to iron.
I don't remember.
Yes. Because she beat me, then send me to go learn to iron.
For example, it was just, you know, something you just do.
And it's sad because he resenting ironing like it was ironing's fault.
I know, right?